My son missed my birthday for years. This time, I didn't answer his call. The phone vibrated on the kitchen table at 11:47 in the morning. I watched it rotate slowly across the wood grain, the screen lit with his name. Marcus, my son. I let my hand rest on the edge of the table and watched the call go to voicemail. The vibration stopped. The screen went dark. I picked up my coffee and took a slow sip, still warm enough to taste. It was my 63rd birthday. He had not called on my 60th, my 61st, or my 62nd. He had not called on my 59th either, though that year I convinced myself there might have been an emergency. There had been no emergency. There had been forgetfulness, or maybe something worse than forgetfulness. Something that looked like indifference dressed in the clothes of a busy life. This year, I suppose, someone had reminded him. I set the coffee down and looked out the window at the elm tree in the side yard. The leaves were beginning to turn, edges curling bronze in the September heat. I had planted that tree the week Marcus turned 4. He had helped me dig, his plastic shovel scraping at the dirt while I worked the real hole. He had wanted to pour the water himself. I let him. Most of it missed the roots, but his face had been so bright I did not correct him. I did not feel angry now. That surprised me. The kitchen was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I have lived alone for 6 years, since the divorce, and the silence no longer bothers me. It clarifies things. It lets me see what I used to ignore when the house was full of voices and obligations and the constant motion of a family that believed itself intact. I stood and rinsed the cup in the sink, then dried my hands on the dish towel that hangs by the window. My reflection in the glass showed a man thinner than I used to be, hair more gray than brown, shoulders still square. I do not look old, but I am aware of time in a way I was not before. I measure it now in calls that do not come, in plans that dissolve, in promises that were never intended to hold weight. Marcus is 31. He works in software, something lucrative and abstract that he explained to me once over dinner 4 years ago. I understood perhaps 20% of it, but I nodded and asked questions because that is what fathers do. He lives 2 hours away in the city, close enough to visit on a weekend, far enough to justify months of absence. He has a girlfriend whose name I have heard, but whose face I have never seen. He tells me they are serious. I do not ask what serious means in his generation. I suspect it means something different than it did in mine. For years I made excuses for him. He was building a career. He was adjusting to adult life. He was healing from the divorce, which had been harder on him than I realized. I told myself these things because I wanted them to be true, and because I did not want to face the alternative. The alternative was that my son had decided, consciously or not, that I was no longer worth the effort. The realization came slowly. It was not a single moment, but an accumulation of small absences. A text message instead of a call on Father's Day. A canceled lunch because of a work deadline. A birthday acknowledged 3 days late with a generic card that said Dad on the front and nothing personal inside. I kept the cards in a drawer in my office, and sometimes I took them out and read them, searching for warmth that was not there. I had started planning something different this year back in July. Not a confrontation. I do not believe in confrontations. They create heat without light. But I had decided that I would stop reaching out first. I would stop suggesting dinners he would cancel. I would stop calling to check in, only to hear the distracted tone in his voice that told me he was doing something else while we spoke. I would stop performing the role of the pursuing father and see what happened when I stepped back. What happened was silence. 6 weeks passed before he noticed. When he finally sent a text asking if everything was okay, I replied that everything was fine. He said good and asked about work. I answered briefly. The conversation died within 4 exchanges. He did not call. He did not suggest a visit. He simply returned to whatever occupied his attention, and I returned to the clarity of my quiet house. But someone must have reminded him about my birthday. A mutual friend, perhaps. His mother, though we speak only when necessary. Or maybe he had looked at a calendar and felt a flicker of guilt strong enough to overcome inertia. It did not matter. The call had come, and I had let it ring through, and now I was standing in my kitchen with a choice in front of me. I could call him back. I could pretend the missed call was an accident, that I had been outside or in the shower. I could hear him wish me a happy birthday, his voice bright with the performance of affection, and I could thank him and ask about his week and let the conversation run its shallow course. We could both pretend that this was enough, that this constituted connection, or I could leave it. I could let the silence stand and see what he did with it. The second option felt lighter. I walked into the living room and sat in the armchair by the bookcase. The house smells like wood and old paper and the faint lemon scent of the cleaner I use on the floors. I have kept it neat since the divorce. There is a peace and order that I did not appreciate when my life was loud. I can think here. I can see the shape of things without distraction. I thought about the last birthday Marcus had acknowledged in person. It had been 5 years ago. He had come for dinner, arrived late, stayed for 90 minutes, checked his phone 11 times, and left before dessert because he had plans with friends. I had made his favorite meal, pot roast with roasted potatoes and carrots. He had eaten quickly and complimented it in a way that felt automatic. When he left, I stood on the porch and watched his car disappear around the corner, and I felt something inside me shift. Not break, shift. Like a bone that had been set wrong and was finally realigning. After that, the excuses became harder to believe. The patterns became impossible to ignore. I began to see the relationship for what it was. A structure held up by one side. Me calling, me suggesting, me accommodating his schedule and his priorities and his understanding of what family meant. Which was very little, apparently. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. The phone was still on the kitchen table. He had not called again. He had not texted. The single attempt had been made, the obligation fulfilled. Now he could tell himself he had tried. But trying once is not trying. It is the performance of trying. It is a gesture designed to relieve guilt without requiring change. I had spent years accepting gestures. I was finished with that. The decision to stop answering did not come from anger. It came from a deeper place, something closer to self-preservation. I had raised Marcus to be independent, to think critically, to question systems and expectations. I had encouraged him to build his own life. But somewhere in that process, he had decided that his own life did not include me. And I could not force him to choose differently. I could only decide how much energy I was willing to invest in a relationship that returned so little. That evening, I drove to the hardware store and bought paint for the guest room. I had been meaning to repaint it for months. The walls were still the pale yellow my ex-wife had chosen a decade ago, and I wanted something different, something that reflected the way I lived now. I chose a soft gray, warm but neutral. The clerk asked if I needed help loading the cans into my car. I told him I was fine. I am 63, not infirm. I can still carry things. When I got home, I moved the furniture to the center of the room and spread the drop cloth. The physical work felt good. It required attention and care, but not emotion. I taped the edges of the trim and poured the paint into the tray. The first stroke went on smooth, covering the yellow in a clean line. I worked slowly, methodically, listening to the radio on low volume in the other room. At 7:30, the phone rang again. Marcus. I set the brush across the tray and wiped my hands on a rag. I walked to the kitchen and looked at the screen. The call rang 4 times, 5, 6. Then it stopped. No voicemail this time. I went back to painting. By 9 o'clock, the first coat was finished. I cleaned the brush and sealed the paint can and stood in the doorway looking at the room. It was unrecognizable already. The yellow was gone, replaced by something calmer and more deliberate. I felt a small satisfaction, the kind that comes from completing a task well. I made a sandwich and ate it standing at the counter. Then I showered and went to bed. The next morning, there was a text message waiting. Hey Dad, tried to call yesterday. Hope you had a good birthday. Let me know when you're free to catch up. I read it 3 times. The language was careful, neutral, designed not to ask too much or acknowledge too little. Let me know when you're free. As if my calendar was the obstacle. As if I had been the one too busy to connect. I did not reply immediately. I set the phone down and made breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, black coffee. I ate slowly and read the news on my tablet. The world continued its usual chaos, politics and weather and scandals that would be forgotten by next week. None of it touched me. I was insulated here, in my small house with my gray walls and my quiet routines. After breakfast, I sat at my desk in the office and opened the drawer where I kept the birthday cards. There were 4 of them, each signed with his name and nothing more. I spread them on the desk in a line and studied them. They told a story, if you knew how to read it. The first one, from 4 years ago, had a handwritten note inside. "Thanks for everything, Dad. Love you." The second one, 3 years ago, had just his signature. The third and fourth were printed messages from the card company with his name scrawled at the bottom. The trajectory was clear. Each year, less effort. Each year, more distance. And I had accepted it, hopeful that the next year would be different, that he would wake up one day and realize what he was losing. But people do not wake up. They choose, over and over, in small increments, until the distance becomes a canyon too wide to cross. I gathered the cards and put them back in the drawer. Then I opened my laptop and logged into my email. There were 17 messages, mostly newsletters and spam. I deleted them without reading, and then opened a new document. I had been thinking about writing a letter to Marcus, something clear and honest that explained how I felt without accusing or demanding. But as I stared at the blank page, I realized that words would not change anything. He already knew how I felt, or he would if he thought about it for more than a moment. The problem was not a lack of understanding. The problem was a lack of interest. So I closed the document without writing anything and went for a walk instead. The neighborhood was quiet on a Tuesday morning. Most people were at work or inside with their air conditioning running. I walked past the elementary school where Marcus had gone, past the park where I had taught him to ride a bike. He had been 7, fearless and stubborn, refusing to let me hold the seat even though he kept tipping over. I had run alongside him anyway, close enough to catch him if he fell too hard. He never did. He figured it out on his own, the way he figured most things out. I had been proud of his independence. I still was, in theory. But independence was supposed to be a foundation for connection, not a replacement for it. When I got home, I replied to his text. "Thanks. I'm doing well. Hope you are too." Short, polite. No invitation to continue the conversation. He replied within an hour. "Good to hear. Maybe we can grab lunch soon." Maybe. The word did all the work. It suggested intention without commitment. It allowed him to feel like he had made an effort without requiring him to follow through. I had heard that word from him dozens of times over the past few years. Maybe we can meet up. Maybe I can visit. Maybe next month. I did not reply. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus sent 3 more messages. The first was a link to an article about a hiking trail he thought I might like. The second was a question about whether I still had his old baseball glove. The third was a photo of a sunset from his apartment window with the caption, "Pretty nice view." I read each one. I did not respond to any of them. I was not playing a game. I was not trying to punish him. I was simply stepping out of a pattern that had exhausted me. For years, I had been the one maintaining the relationship, and it had not brought us closer. It had only taught him that he did not need to try. That I would always be there, waiting, ready to accept whatever scraps of attention he offered. I was done waiting. On a Thursday afternoon, my ex-wife called. We had not spoken in 3 months. She got straight to the point. "Marcus says you're ignoring him." "I'm not ignoring him," I said. "I'm just not chasing him anymore." There was a pause. "He's worried about you." "He's not worried. He's uncomfortable. There's a difference." Another pause. Longer this time. "He wants to know if something is wrong." "Nothing is wrong," I said. "Everything is actually very clear." "You're being cryptic." "I'm being honest. I spent years trying to stay close to him and it didn't work, so I stopped. That's all." She sighed. "You're his father." I am, and he's my son. But that doesn't mean I have to accept being treated like an afterthought. He's busy. Everyone is busy. That's not an excuse. She did not argue. She had always known, I think, that Marcus took me for granted. But she had her own relationship with him, separate from mine, and she did not want to jeopardize it by pointing out what he refused to see. Just talk to him, she said finally. I will when he has something real to say. We ended the call shortly after. I felt no satisfaction from the conversation, but I did not regret it either. I had stated the truth plainly, and she had heard it, even if she did not want to accept it. That weekend, I finished painting the guest room and started on the hallway. The work gave me something to focus on, a project with visible progress. I liked the way the house was beginning to look, cleaner and more intentional. It felt like mine now, not like a place I was occupying temporarily while waiting for someone else to decide what came next. On Sunday afternoon, Marcus called again. I was up on a ladder, cutting in the paint along the ceiling, when I heard the phone ring in the other room. I climbed down carefully and walked to where I had left it on the kitchen counter. His name was on the screen. I watched the call ring through. 30 seconds later, a voicemail notification appeared. I tapped the screen and listened. Hey, Dad. It's me. I wanted to check in. Mom said you guys talked, and I just wanted to make sure everything's okay. I know I haven't been great about staying in touch, and I'm sorry about that. Things have been really crazy with work, and I've just been trying to keep my head above water, you know? Anyway, give me a call when you get a chance. I'd like to catch up. Okay, talk soon. I played the message twice. His voice sounded uncertain, which was unusual. Marcus had always been confident, even when he was young. But uncertainty was not the same as remorse. The apology was vague, unattached to anything specific. I know I haven't been great about staying in touch. That was one way to describe 4 years of missed birthdays and canceled plans. Another way would be to say he had abandoned the relationship while expecting it to remain intact. I deleted the voicemail and went back to painting. By October, the house was transformed. Every room had been repainted except the kitchen, which I planned to tackle later in the fall. The walls were soft grays and muted blues, colors that felt calm and deliberate. I bought new curtains for the living room, simple linen panels that let in light without glare. I replaced the old rug in the hallway with something darker that would not show wear. I was building a space that reflected the person I had become, not the person I used to be. Marcus stopped texting after the 3rd week of no responses. I assumed he had given up or decided I was being unreasonable. Either way, the silence was mutual now. I did not miss the shallow updates or the half-hearted invitations. I had my work, my routines, my quiet house. I had started reading again, something I had not done regularly in years. I finished 2 novels in 3 weeks and started a 3rd. I took longer walks, sometimes covering 4 or 5 miles in the cooler evening air. I felt lighter. In early November, I received a letter in the mail. The return address was Marcus's apartment in the city. The envelope was handwritten, which surprised me. He had probably not written a letter by hand since high school. I opened it standing by the mailbox. The letter was 2 pages, his handwriting still slanted and rushed the way it had always been. Dad, I don't know why you're not answering, but I'm hoping this reaches you. I know I haven't been the best son. I know I've let you down. I got caught up in my own life and didn't realize how much time was passing. I thought we had more time. I thought you would always be there, so I didn't make you a priority. I see now that was wrong. I want to fix this. I want us to be close again. Please call me. Marcus. I read it twice, then folded it and put it back in the envelope. The words were better than anything he had said in years. They acknowledged the problem. They expressed regret. But they still carried an assumption that bothered me. I thought you would always be there, as if my presence was a given, something he could rely on without effort, as if I did not have a choice. I went inside and set the letter on my desk. Then I sat down and wrote a reply. Marcus, I received your letter. I appreciate the honesty, and I believe you mean what you said. But apologies without change are just words. You have known for years that I wanted more connection, more time, more attention. You chose not to give it. That was your right. But it is also my right to stop waiting. I am not angry, and I do not hate you. I simply recognize that I cannot build a relationship alone. If you want things to be different, you will need to show me through consistent action, not promises. I am here if you are willing to put in the work, but I will not chase you anymore. Dad. I read it over once, then sealed it in an envelope and walked to the mailbox. I dropped it in and heard it land with a soft thud. Then I walked back inside and felt nothing but calm. 3 days later, Marcus showed up at my door. It was a Saturday afternoon, overcast and cool. I was in the garage organizing tools when I heard the car pull into the driveway. I walked to the front of the house and saw him getting out, dressed in jeans and a jacket, his face serious. He saw me and stopped. Hey, hello, can we talk? I nodded and gestured toward the front door. He followed me inside, and I led him to the living room. He looked around, noticing the changes. You repainted. I did. It looks good. Thank you. We sat, him on the couch and me in the armchair. The silence stretched for a moment before he spoke. I got your letter. I figured. You're right, about all of it. I waited. I don't know what happened, he said. I didn't mean for things to get this bad. I just kept thinking I'd make it up to you later, and then later kept not happening. And then it felt like too much time had passed, and I didn't know how to fix it. You fix it by showing up, I said. Not once when you feel guilty, but regularly. Consistently. He nodded. I know. Do you? He looked at me, and I saw something in his face I had not seen in years. Uncertainty. Vulnerability. I don't want to lose you. Then don't, I said. But understand that you cannot keep me through words alone. I need to see that I matter to you. Not as an obligation, but as someone you actually want in your life. You do matter. Then prove it. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then he said, What do you want me to do? I want you to call me once a week. Not a text, a call. I want you to visit once a month, even if it's just for an afternoon. I want you to remember my birthday, not because someone reminded you, but because you marked it on your calendar and planned for it. I want you to treat me like someone you care about, not someone you tolerate out of duty. He nodded slowly. Okay. Can you do that? Yes. Then we can start over, I said. But if you fall back into old patterns, I will not keep trying. I have spent enough years hoping you would change. I am done hoping. I need to see it. You will, he said. I promise. I did not tell him that I had heard promises before. I simply nodded and said, We'll see. He stayed for 2 hours. We talked about his work, his girlfriend, the things happening in his life that I had only heard about in fragments. He asked about the house, about my routines, about the books I had been reading. It felt tentative, like we were both learning how to talk to each other again, but it felt real. When he left, he hugged me on the porch. It was brief, but solid. I'll call you Wednesday, he said. I'll answer. He drove away, and I stood on the porch watching until his car disappeared. The air was cold, and the sky was heavy with clouds. I went inside and made dinner, something simple, and ate it at the kitchen table. Wednesday came. The phone rang at 6:30 in the evening. I answered. Hey, Dad. Hello, Marcus. We talked for 40 minutes. It was not profound. We discussed the weather, a project he was working on, a book I recommended. But he was present. He listened. He asked questions. And when we hung up, I felt something I had not felt in years. Hope. Small, cautious, but real. Over the next 2 months, he called every week. He visited twice, once for a Sunday afternoon and once for dinner on a Friday. He remembered Thanksgiving and asked if I wanted to join him and his girlfriend at her family's house. I declined, preferring the quiet, but I appreciated the invitation. He did not push. On the evening of December 15th, he called and asked what I wanted for Christmas. I told him I did not need anything. He said he wanted to get me something anyway. I suggested a book, and he wrote down the title. "Are you coming for Christmas?" he asked. "If you want me to." "I do," he said. "I really do." "Then I'll be there." We set a time. He said he would cook, which surprised me. I had not known he could cook. He laughed and said he had learned recently that his girlfriend had been teaching him. I heard affection in his voice when he mentioned her, and I was glad. He deserved happiness. I had never wanted anything less for him. When Christmas came, I drove to the city and spent the afternoon at his apartment. His girlfriend was warm and thoughtful, the kind of person who asks questions and listens to the answers. The meal was good, better than I expected. Marcus was attentive, refilling drinks, checking in, making sure I was comfortable. It felt different. It felt like he was trying. Before I left, he walked me to my car. The city was lit with holiday lights, strings of white and gold draped across storefronts and trees. It was cold, but clear. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Thank you for inviting me." "I'm going to keep doing this," he said. "I'm not going to fall back into how things were." "I know," I said, and I meant it. He hugged me again, longer this time. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too." I drove home through the quiet streets, the city lights fading into darkness as I reached the highway. The house was cold when I arrived, and I turned up the heat and made tea. I sat in the armchair by the bookcase and looked at the gray walls, the clean floors, the space I had built for myself. It was enough. It had always been enough. But it was better now, knowing that I had not settled for less than I deserved, that I had drawn a line and held it, even when it was hard, even when it meant risking everything. The phone was on the table beside me. It did not ring. It did not need to. I knew it would eventually, when the time was right, and when it did, I would answer.